Well, good morning. My name is Pastor Kelly. I get to be one of the pastors here on staff. If we haven't met, I cannot wait to meet you in the lobby afterwards. But something you need to know about me is that, my wife, we are trying to do something that we did not grow up with. It's called gentle parenting. And when you have, it's because we just had regular old parenting, growing up, but this gentle parenting thing we want to try out, because when you have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, you start to run out of options. Okay, you're like, I can't just do the things when we don't live in LA. You can't just spank your kids in public anymore. I'm in Utah now, and I have to remember that. And so I pick up this book. All about compassionate discipline and gentle parenting, probably written by a guy who eats quinoa for fun or something. And the book tells me to give my child options, to give them choices so that one day they'll make the right choices, not just the easy choices. And I'm like, sounds great to me. So my wife and I, we read the book, and one day I'm like, hey, sweetheart, I got this. I'm going to do the morning routine. You just stay in bed because I'm going to be a loving, awesome husband. And so I get the kids up, I get them dressed and get them ready, and I pour my kids a kid-sized bowl of Cheerios, just like those little plastic bowls with a plastic spoon. And then I tell them, hey guys, you have 15 minutes to finish this whole bowl of Cheerios. And at the end of that 15 minutes, we're going to school, because that's all the time that I can afford at this point in the morning routine. And they both look at me with confident eyeballs saying, you got it, Dad. And I'm like, this is going great. And so I go and I get myself ready. I talk to my wife a little bit, brush my teeth, and I come down 7 minutes later just to see how things are going. Things are going. Instead of their heads focused on the Cheerios devouring every bite, what they were instead doing is their heads were focused on their Legos constructing Transformers. And so I did my gentle parenting move, and I just got down on one knee, just eye to eye, just like, hey, buddy. Hey, Lear. Just so you know, you have 7 minutes. You can either finish your Cheerios, or you can go to bed, or you can go to school hungry. It's your choice. And so I gave them a warning, because ultimately it was going to be their what? Their choice. Got it. I figured that would be enough, So I come back down 7 minutes later. It's time to wrap up this, the breakfast time and go straight into the car. So we go into the car and we're driving to school, and guess what happens 5 minutes later? I hear a scream in the back of the car, Dad, I'm hungry. Do you have any snacks? And literally, I say to them what every single parent has been saying ever since the beginning of time. I told you so. I warned you. And now we have to suffer in traffic with a hungry toddler from Saratoga Springs all the way to South Jordan for the next 55 minutes. Thank you, Utah traffic. And so once I dropped the kids off, I called my wife and I said, this gentle parenting thing, I tried it this morning and it didn't work. And you know what she said to me? I told you so. Anyways, why did I tell you that story? You might be wondering. Well, it's because that is exactly the tone that Jesus takes when he's talking to the nation of Israel and to the Pharisees. Because wherever you find an I told you so, the other side of that is a choice. Whenever you find an I told you so, the beginning of that bookend was a choice that people are making. And the nation of Israel made some choices, and the Pharisees and the leaders of the nation of Israel made some choices. And so today, I want us to look at 3 choices that they made, so maybe we can avoid them. Sound good? Sound good? So let's look at the first part of the passage together, and let's just jump in. Matthew 23, 29 through 32 says this, Woe to you, teachers Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if I had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then, complete what your ancestors started. Okay, so the big question is, what choices did these leaders make so that we can avoid them? And the first choice that they made was that they chose the illusion of moral superiority instead of humble repentance. So if you're taking notes, the fill in the blank is illusion. Now, the reason why the operative word is illusion, because an illusion is something I present to you on the outside that is different in reality. And so sometimes we get satisfied with our outward appearance while neglecting what's really going on the inside. It says this, verse 29, woe to you, teachers, Pharisees, and hypocrites. So just to recap, what is a woe? A woe is a compassionate alarm, not to write you off, but to wake you up. And a Pharisee was known for this, righteous illusion that they would put on. They would put on a show. They were called hypocrites, was really a mask that they would play and perform for people. They would perform religious activity while remaining spiritually dead. So they were Pharisees, and when you know that you have a Pharisee in the Bible, is you need to know that they were not being fair, you see. And so that's how you know you have a Pharisee. That's Pharisees are not Pharisee. Okay, Bible joke complete. All right, and one of the things that they did is they decorated tombs for the prophets. What's so significant and what's so insignificant about that? Well, the significant thing about decorating tombs for the prophets is that they were signaling virtue that they thought they had. Right? This was first century virtue signaling. And if you don't know what virtue signaling is, here's a definition for you. Virtue signaling is when somebody publicly displays a moral stance or belief or value mainly to look good, but not actually to live out. See, what they were saying is, I want to pacify my guilt for my ancestors murdering the prophets, and so to make up for it, I'm just going to decorate their tomb. I'm going to honor the messenger, not the message. So far, so good. And I see this happen in my life, this kind of generational virtue signaling happen in my life when I do prison ministry and I get to do some chapel services. And in Los Angeles, what I typically ask the inmates who come to my chapel service, I usually ask them questions and say, hey, tell me a little bit about your spiritual life. Tell me about your relationship with God. And they usually go into this long rant and this long tirade of how their family loves God, how their abuelita loves Jesus, their grandmother, prayed for them, or how they have these beads, or how they were drugged to church. They were dragged to church, not drugged to church. Drug, maybe it's drug. Different type of reference, different context altogether. But their relationship with God really wasn't their own relationship with God. They were signaling to the virtue of other people in order to justify or even pacify the reality that they don't listen to the messenger. Because I would ask them about their relationship with their grandmother, and they would say, yeah, I love her. She's my heart. In fact, I got a tattoo of her on my chest. And they can do that. That's great. I like tattoos, and I like all those things. But the question is, do you listen to your grandmother? They would say, clearly not. I'm here. Because they honored the messenger and not the message. That's a type of hypocrisy that Jesus frowns on and actually pushes back against, especially if you're leading people into sin. It doesn't matter how many graves you decorate, it's not going to change the murderous ancestral past that they had. And they And they were telling themselves another illusion. They were telling themselves a lie, and Jesus exposes that lie. And he says this in verse 30, and you say, if we would have lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have ever taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. What are they saying? What they're saying is that, hey, we know better. You know why? Because we live now, right? They live in a different time of their ancestors, and therefore they think they're more spiritually enlightened than their ancestors. That is logically dishonest. That is intellectually dishonest. And the fallacy that they are employing is what C.S. Lewis calls chronological snobbery. Like a snob? I don't know. I just read the paper. No, chronological snobbery fallacy says this. People today are wiser, better, and morally superior simply because we live later in history. And C.S. Lewis outlines 3 ideas what a chronological snob usually believes. Number 1, we wouldn't make that mistake they made. Number 2, we are more enlightened than previous generations. And number 3, we've evolved past their sins. See, essentially, what they were guilty of is passing judgment on their past, but giving grace to themselves. And that's typical. I mean, this is what I did. I did this when I heard about this one particular thing that happened in recent time. It was called Ocean Gate. Anybody remember Ocean Gate? Regarding the Titan sub that went down to see the Titanic and didn't make it back. Here's what it looked like. And please, I'm just saying it's hard not to be judgmental when you look at this picture. All right, these are first-class seats to go see the Titanic that people paid for, and it was really hard for me to not be judgmental, thinking I would never do something like that. In fact, when the Titan submarine made it halfway down, it didn't go very far. It actually imploded and everybody passed. But when the news broke about this incident, people online were lighting up the comment sections. They were saying things like this. I would have never gotten in that thing. I would have known it's not safe. I don't know how they would know that. How could those billionaires be so stupid? Again, these are all statements of judgment. When we don't know the design, we don't know what was promised, and we don't know what these people were anticipating with this journey. We don't know, but we do know that we're alive and they're not. And just based on the chronology of the events, we can't have false sense of comfort or a false sense of moral superiority. And that's what the religious leaders did, and Jesus is calling it out. Hindsight creates a false confidence. It just does. And chronological snobbery creates fake moral superiority, and Jesus exposes it. So let's not fall into the illusion of moral superiority, right? Let's not just settle for outward appearance. If people think everything's okay, then I'm okay. Because we believe that God is the one who transforms us from the inside out, and we trust that process, don't we? So the big question today is, what bad choices did Israel's leaders make so that we can avoid them? Number 1, it's that illusion of moral superiority. And number 2, if you're following along in your handout, they ignored God's repeated warnings. They ignored God's repeated warnings. Verse 33 says this, you snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify, others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, who you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly, I tell you, all this will come on this generation. So what does this mean? First, brood of vipers. In the Greek, the word viper is echidna. And when you have a brood of echidna, that's a lot of echidna. And typically, the word echidna is defined as ground-dwelling serpents. And in the first century, the image that would pop into someone's mind when somebody would mention brood of vipers is actually an agricultural environment which farmers would then do a controlled burn over the land that they were not using in order to rid it of all the pests or pesticides, right? They didn't have pesticides. They didn't have crop field, like planes, dropping pesticides in the first century. That didn't come for a long time later. But what they did have was fire. And so what they would do is just burn the land and all the, there's children here, I don't want to say, all the pests that would devour the crops, they would extinguish them in that way. Okay, sound good? And by the time the fire would get close enough to the echidna, it was too late for the echidna to crawl out of the ground and escape. So far, so good. Great. And Jesus is saying, that's your fate. That's where you're headed. How will you escape the coming condemnation of hell? Let's just pause. I know some of you may not be fully convinced about this Jesus thing. And I just want you to know that this is a safe place for you to explore that. And this is a place that you can belong before you believe. Now, some of you are convinced about Jesus. And you will have people ask you this question the moment you tell them that you're a Christian, or eventually you're going to have to defend this. Because the question is that is literally burning on the hearts of most men and women is, how can a loving God condemn anyone to hell? I don't know if you've ever heard that question. I hear it often, and maybe you've had to struggle with that yourself. And I want us to understand that, understand what the Bible means by hell together. So when it comes to heaven and when it comes to hell, we need to understand that in relational categories, not just a place where you reside, right? Similarly, we don't always refer to our home as a place where we reside. It's a place where people reside. We regard our home in relational categories. Your home is not just four walls and a roof. Your home is a family that loves you. And typically, that's how we resolve what it means to be home. Now, similarly, with heaven, heaven is a relational category where you spend uninterrupted eternal time with the God who made you, the God who loves you, and the God who wants to be your friend forever, for eternity. You have uninterrupted relationship with that God. Now, it would not be loving for that God to force anyone to be in his presence who doesn't want to be there. And that's how we understand heaven and hell, in these relational concepts. And Jesus essentially gives people what they want. And C.S. Lewis actually says this way better than I could ever. He says that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. And Jesus warns them, and he warns us. And here's the thing. I love that Jesus doesn't give up here. He doesn't say there's condemnation coming and then just walks away. No, what he does, he says there's condemnation coming, and then he's going to send more help. He's going to get help. He says this in verse 33. I am sending you prophets, sages, and teachers. See, he doesn't give up on them. But they do three things. You will flog them, you will crucify them, and then you'll chase them from town to town. So who are these prophets, sages, and teachers? Well, these are the first early apostles all the way to modern day disciples. And what Jesus is prophesying does come true. If you look at the early church and if you read the book of Acts, you see people being martyred and suffering persecution. And actually, I have a historical book here, dates back to 1567. It's called The Fox's Book of Martyrs. And in it outlines what happened to the early believers throughout history. See, for example, James, the son of Zebedee, he was executed by sword in AD 44. Philip, he was crucified in Phrygia. Matthew was stabbed to death in Ethiopia. This is the Matthew that wrote the book of Matthew. James the Just, who is the half-brother of Jesus, also wrote the book of James. He was thrown from the temple and beaten to death. Peter, crucified upside down under Nero in AD 64. Paul, beheaded by Nero. Thomas, doubting Thomas? He was speared in India. It's like speared, like through. Andrew was bound to an X-shaped cross and preached to crowds for 2 days before dying. And the condemnation was happening on that generation. Now, I don't think Jesus is actually talking about any other generation, but the generation of the people that he's actually talking to, because the prophecy happened in AD 70 when Caesar Tiberius, surrounded Jerusalem and then sieged Jerusalem. In fact, we have a photo of a 19th century painting by Scottish painter David Roberts, of what that siege could have looked like. And even to this day, the temple has been demolished, and all that's left is a mosque and a wailing wall that currently to this day, Jewish people are mourning the loss of their temple since AD 70, prophesied by Jesus. So, that concludes all of the 7 woes. And this is somewhat troubling for me, because I've had a hard time seeing the compassionate part of this alarm, and all I've seen is condemnation on a nation. And I feel like Jesus is angry, and I picture him in my head with a red face and smoke and a clenched fist. And so I'm like a little uneasy about this. So what I did this week is I called up Pastor Trevor from the Lehigh campus. He doesn't live at the Lehigh campus. He just happened to call him. He works there. And I just told him, I'm like, hey man, I'm having a hard time reconciling the compassion with all this condemnation talk. And I don't know if you're feeling that. I'm feeling that, and maybe just me. And he reminded me what my 6th grade psychology professor reminded me. And he reminded me that anger is a secondary emotion. Typically, it's what you see on top of the iceberg, but if you look underneath the water, there's a mountain of other things going on. And I'm like, brilliant. I totally knew that, but you reminded me, so I'm gonna give you credit. So if you look underneath the surface and you keep reading this passage, you'll find the mountain of love, the mountain of compassion, and the mountain of broken-heartedness that you'll see at the heart of Jesus, because you know that he is not about to give up on them, even though they are about to give up on him. So what bad choices did the nation's leaders make? Well, they rejected the love of God. They rejected the love of God that was coming for them. Verse 37 through 39 says this: Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I've longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Now pause. Now, whenever you see a double Jerusalem or a double name, in my house that means one thing, that means someone's in trouble. But in the Bible, they didn't have exclamation marks or anything like that. So what the authors typically did is repeat the concept twice, or repeat the name twice to add emphasis. And so you see that in Luke, you see that in Jesus talking to Martha, you see that when Jesus is talking to Simon, you see that when Jesus is talking to Saul. And Jesus says this to Jerusalem: how often I long to gather how often I long to gather you like a hen gathers her chicks. So, when I think of Jesus, I don't think of Jesus in this way typically. See, Jesus is using what is called anthropomorphic language, is when you compare an animal to a human. And, I do this with my friends at the gym. You know, I work out with my friend Ben Roby, and he is strong as an ox, right? So that's anthropomorphic language. Whenever I go to a hockey game in Utah, I see flags and costumes of people wearing a mammoth that represents the strength and elegance of the Utah hockey players, right? Right, so that's anthropomorphic language. I don't expect Jesus to compare himself to a mother hen at all. Like that is something that that was not on my bingo card when I was reading this passage. But Jesus' love and compassion that underlies all the condemnation is a mountain of love, a mountain of compassion, and a mountain of grief, the same kind of grief that a mother hen would have when she's losing her chicks. Jesus doesn't end these 7 woes with a clenched fist, but with a cracked voice. And all he's saying is, woe to those who reject the love of God. So here's the important question you need to ask yourself today. Here's the important question. Where have you seen the love of God in your life? Where have you seen the love of God in your life? And it's my conviction, no matter how high your highs are, or no matter how low your lows are, or no matter what your circumstances may be, the love of God is present somewhere in that, like breadcrumbs spread throughout your whole life. The problem is, maybe we don't see it. It's not that it's not there, it's just the problem is our attention. See, there's a famous study called the Selective Tension Test by Daniel Simmons and Christopher Cabrice, where they asked people to watch a video and count how many times the players wearing white shirts pass the ball. So I thought it might be fun if we take that test here just to see how well we have selective attention. Sound good? Go ahead and check out the screen.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
All right. Did you guys count how many times? How many? Anybody count 13? 14? 15? Wow, that's it? 15? 16? Anybody get 16? Wow. Well, give yourselves a pat on the back if you got 15, because 15 is the right answer. 15 is the right answer. Now, what almost nobody recognizes or notices is that in the midst of all of that was going on, there was a massive gorilla walk into the scene, point to the camera, beat their chest, and keep walking off. Like, there it is. Did you see it? Did you catch it? Did you catch it? Well, it's like that with God's love through our life. It's not that it's not there. It's just sometimes we don't see it. In the same way, sometimes we miss the love, we miss the gorilla-sized love of God that is present in our life, simply not because it's not there, but because we are just focused somewhere else, right? So, the bottom line for tonight, or for today, is yes, woe to those who reject the love of God, but happy are those who receive the love of God. Happy are those who receive the love of God. If you weren't to get anything from today's lesson, I want you to understand that. I want you to choose to receive the love of God that's scattered throughout your whole life, and I want you to do something about it. I want you to make a choice to do something about it. Because every woe is a compassionate alarm intended to wake us up to the reality that perhaps we are paying attention to the wrong things. So where do you see the love of God in your life? There's 7 areas that I think you can see the love of God in your life. I wrote them down for you in your note sheet on the other side. You can follow along with me. Number one, you might have seen the love of God in relationships that entered into your life at pivotal moments. I'm sure you might be sitting next to somebody that qualifies for. Number two, maybe moments when God protected us from significant danger. I know that for me, it was relational danger before I met my wife. Every ex-girlfriend dumped me, and I'm thankful for it because my rejection was God's protection, all right? Number three, moments when God allowed the consequences of our poor decisions to impact us. Number four, moments of joy, beauty, and wonder. Number five, moments when you realize you had built your life on something false. Number six, moments when you realize God brought something good out of something awful that happened to you. And lastly, and most importantly, we see the love of God through Jesus and his death on the cross. See, God has been scattering breadcrumbs of love throughout your whole life, and the simple question is, what will you do with it? Because it is your choice after all. And now I want to give you an opportunity. I want to invite you to receive the love of Jesus today. And especially if you've never received the love of Jesus today, this is no better time to do that. There's no better time to do that than today. Don't miss the love of God that is so evidently clear in your life. I don't want you to miss it. This is your opportunity. So what I'm going to invite you to do is go ahead and bow your head and close your eyes. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand or do anything weird. But what I will ask you to do is to make a choice. And if you've never chosen to invite Jesus to be the center point of your affections and your attention and receive the love of God, I want to invite you to do that. And I'm going to pray in the first person, and you can just repeat this prayer in your heart after me. We can say this: Jesus, today I choose you. I admit that I have sinned and that I cannot save myself. I believe you died for me, you rose for me, and you are offering me forgiveness and a new life. So right now, I receive your love. I turn from my old way of living and I give myself fully to you. Be my Savior, be my Lord. Change my heart from the inside out. Thank you for welcoming me, forgiving me, and calling me yours. Today I choose to follow you for the rest of my life. And in Jesus' name, amen.